You get one shot at revenge in this life, and Su Chen already burned his. So when death gave him a second chance, he decided the whole world would pay for it. His name was Su Chen, and in his first life, he was nothing special. Just a delivery man, running packages through a city that never noticed him. He had a fiancée, a small apartment he was proud of, and dreams that never got the chance to grow. Then the world ended. Not with a warning, not with a countdown, just a sudden, screaming collapse of everything he knew. The sun turned vicious, the ground cracked open, and monsters crawled out from beneath the earth. Su Chen survived, but survival in that world was its own kind of curse. He starved while others hoarded. He fought for scraps while the woman he loved slept beside another man. And when the end finally came for him, it came at her hands. Betrayed, beaten, left to bleed out on the floor of the very shelter he built to keep her safe. She didn't even flinch. She called him useless while he died, watching her laugh with the man who replaced him. That should have been the end of his story. Instead, he opened his eyes 1 month before the apocalypse began. Reborn, with every memory of his old life burned into his mind like a scar that refused to heal. Every death, every betrayal, every warehouse full of supplies that would soon be worth more than gold. He remembered all of it. And this time, he wasn't going to be the man who died, begging. To understand what he was walking back into, you have to understand what the apocalypse actually was. It started with the sun, an abnormal surge of solar energy that sent temperatures spiking and the crust of the earth shifting beneath every city on the planet. Volcanoes woke up that had been silent for centuries. Lakes disappeared overnight. And underground, things that should never have existed began clawing their way to the surface. In his old life, he learned all of this the hard way, scavenging through ruins with nothing but his bare hands and desperation. This time, he had something no one else had: foreknowledge. He knew exactly which warehouses would be emptied, which cities would drown, and which lakes would dry into dust within days. While the rest of the world was still checking the news and telling themselves not to panic, Su Chen was already making a list. On a commercial bus racing through the city, strangers debated whether the disasters happening across Asia were really as bad as the rumors said. One passenger, calm and unreadable, already knew the truth better than anyone else on that bus. The end of the world was not coming. It had already begun, and only he understood what that truly meant. A woman nearby admitted she'd rushed onto the bus without packing any supplies at all. Another passenger mentioned that entire supply warehouses across the region had already been stripped bare. The numbers being thrown around were staggering. Hundreds of billions in vanished goods, maybe more. Someone joked that the end of the world might finally make everyone equal. Su Chen almost laughed at that. He had lived through the end of the world once already, and equality was the last thing it ever offered. The strong took everything, and the weak simply disappeared. He'd been an ordinary man back then, caught off guard just like everyone else. This time, ordinary wasn't going to cut it. A woman on the bus tried to strike up conversation, clearly looking for someone to lean on once the chaos hit. Su Chen barely acknowledged her. He had far more important business waiting for him, and no room left in his plans for anyone who couldn't help him get there. The moment the bus reached its stop, he was already moving. Straight to the one place he knew would change everything, the warehouse where he used to work. In his old life, this warehouse's owner fled the moment disaster struck, and every ounce of stock inside was left to rot. This time, Su Chen intended to get there first. He clocked in, pulled on his old work jacket, and stepped into the storage room like nothing had changed. A coworker warned him he was 21 seconds late, docking half a day's pay without blinking. Su Chen just smiled and kept walking, because what he was about to do would make that pay cut meaningless. He activated an ability that no one else on Earth possessed, a power called space. It let him fold entire rooms into a pocket dimension of his own, tens of thousands of meters wide, hidden from the world completely. Shelves, crates, rice, cooking oil, meat, everything vanished into his personal storage in seconds. In his old life, this same ability let him drain entire lakes and strip whole cities before the world even realized what was happening. This time, he wasn't wasting a single day. Within minutes, the warehouse that once held his boss's fortune stood completely empty. Just an echoing shell, and one man standing quietly in the center of it. 3 coworkers walked in expecting to loot the place themselves. Instead, they found nothing but bare concrete and Su Chen, calm as ever. When they demanded answers, he simply told them the truth. He had taken everything. They lunged for him, furious, but before a single hand could reach him, he was already gone. A second ability let him tear open a small portal and slip through it, landing safely blocks away in an alley. In his old life, this power once saved him from monsters that would have torn him apart. This time, it saved him from something far less dangerous: 3 angry men who never even got close. With his zero-cost shopping spree complete, Su Chen tossed his work jacket into the air and walked away without looking back. An emergency broadcast buzzed on his phone, warning of unusual seismic activity, urging calm, promising everything would be fine. He almost laughed at that too. The government didn't know the world was ending. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't want anyone to panic before they finished saving themselves first. Then his phone rang, and his hands started shaking before he even answered. It was her, the woman who watched him die and called him weak while she did it. Her name was Xiao Qin, and in his last life, she was the person he trusted most. She screamed at him for disappearing, for putting his house up for sale without telling her. She demanded he hand it over as a gift, or she'd refuse to marry him at all. On her end of the call, she was applying lipstick, fresh from another man's bed. Su Chen listened to every word without a flicker of emotion. In his old life, he spent 5 years feeding her, protecting her, keeping her alive while the world burned around them. And her reward was betrayal, again and again, until the night she finally killed him herself. Right there in the shelter he built with his own hands, in front of his own body, she laughed with the man who helped her do it. This time, he wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. He ended the call without another word, his hand trembling, not from grief, but from restraint. The two people who destroyed his last life were going to suffer far longer than he ever did. But first, he needed money. A lot of it. He called his real estate agent and offered his house at half its market value, on one condition, cash, and he wanted it that day. When he arrived to finalize the deal, Xiao Qin was already waiting, her new boyfriend at her side, baseball bat in hand. The man swung threats at him like they meant something. Su Chen answered by lifting him off the ground with one hand and slamming him into the pavement. When Xiao Qin lunged to defend her lover, he backhanded her across the face without hesitation. She stared at him in shock, as if the man she once controlled had somehow slipped through her fingers. He stepped past both of them and walked into the office like they didn't exist. The agent, dazzled by the low price, agreed to a full, immediate payment, thrilled at what he thought was easy profit. Su Chen walked out with nearly $1 million added to his account, and a plan already 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. Because a house was just the beginning. What he needed now was supplies, weapons, medicine, and enough resources to survive a world that was about to burn itself alive. And somewhere out there, hidden in plain sight, was every crystal core, every mutant beast, and every secret he already knew the location of. The clock was already ticking, and Su Chen intended to make every single second count. His next move was simple: mortgage everything he had left, for even more cash. He found a loan office run by a large man named Day, the older brother of the very thug he'd humiliated outside the real estate office. In his old life, this man died early, torn apart by mutant beasts, before he killed him. Su Chen offered him a deal too good to pass up, and Day, thinking he'd found an easy mark, handed over $500,000 without hesitation. With cash finally in hand, Su Chen made his way to the city's most extravagant hotel, the Green City Hotel, a place he remembered clearly from his last life, as the only building strong enough to survive the disasters ahead. He booked the presidential suite, complete with its own private pool, and ordered a banquet of 1,000 tables. The hotel manager nearly choked on her tea at the size of the order, but a deposit of $50,000 quickly changed her tune. She assumed he was hiding old money, the kind of quiet wealth that only reveals itself on a wedding day. She had no idea the truth was far stranger and far more calculated than anything she imagined. Meanwhile, Xiao Qin and her boyfriend Xiao Yu began putting the pieces together. If Su Chen could afford a banquet like that, then maybe he wasn't as broke as he'd let them believe. Xiao Qin's mind raced with visions of silk dresses and butlers, convinced her old fiancé was secretly rich. She had no idea the money was borrowed, gambled, and already halfway spent on supplies she'd never understand the value of. Back home, Su Chen spent an entire afternoon downloading loan apps, nearly 80 of them, squeezing out every last coin he could gather. By the time he was done, he had almost 1 million more, and a shopping list that read like survival gospel. Fireplaces, ice makers, tons of smokeless coal. Anything that could regulate the brutal heat and cold about to tear through the world. While arranging deliveries, he ran into Lena, Xiao Qian's closest friend and the very woman who introduced the two of them in the first place. She tried to convince him that Xiao Qin had only been testing his loyalty, that she truly missed him. Su Chen simply pulled his arm free and walked away, unmoved by an act he'd already seen fail once before. Later that night, at an upscale club, he crossed paths with a woman named Yun Yun, freshly heartbroken and drowning her sorrows in liquor. Unlike everyone else circling him for status, she wasn't after anything. Su Chen warned her gently to stock up on food while she still could, then slipped away before her friends could corner him for the rest of the night. The next morning, trucks arrived at a rented warehouse, delivering everything he'd purchased: ice, coal, and enough machinery to make Xiao Qin suspicious all over again. She and Lena rushed over to investigate, convinced the elaborate setup was proof of an upcoming proposal. Su Chen told them plainly that if they wanted answers, they'd have to help move the boxes first. Disgusted but desperate for a future she still believed was coming, Xiao Qin spent the entire day hauling supplies like common labor. By evening, exhausted and covered in sweat, she expected her reward, a proposal, a title, a life of luxury finally within reach. Instead, Su Chen thanked her for the help and told her she wasn't getting paid a single coin for her work. Her fury exploded instantly, and she accused him of lying about being wealthy, about everything. He calmly deflected, claiming the supplies were for a charity his boss wanted to fund, a lie just convincing enough to buy him more time. She stormed off, swearing revenge for a humiliation she still didn't fully understand. Su Chen barely reacted. In the apocalypse to come, empty threats meant absolutely nothing. Only actions would matter, and he had already decided exactly which actions he was about to take. With his shopping finally complete, Su Chen allowed himself one small luxury, a quiet dinner at an upscale restaurant before the sky turned against them. A dish on the menu caught his eye, priced absurdly high, prepared personally by the restaurant's head chef. When she stepped out to serve him herself, he recognized her instantly from a previous life he alone remembered. She was known back then as the Hell's Chef, famous for turning monster flesh into something almost edible, and infamous for everything that came with that skill. Her name was Duanya, and she had no idea yet just how important she was about to become to him. Outside the restaurant, Xiao Qian and Lina watched jealously through the window, more convinced than ever that Su Chen was hiding immense wealth. None of them understood that every single coin he spent was already a calculated investment in staying alive. Later that night, in the golden heart of the city's entertainment district, Su Chen allowed himself one last taste of a world about to disappear forever. In his old life, he never had the chance to enjoy nights like this, always too busy scraping together enough to survive until morning. This time, he knew exactly how little time was left before none of it would matter at all. The following day, his supplies finally arrived at the warehouse, and he oversaw every shipment personally, making sure nothing was wasted. Xiao Qin and Lina tracked him down once again, drawn by the sheer scale of what he was accumulating. Even Lina, greedy for a taste of the wealth she assumed was coming, began imagining her own future beside a rich benefactor. Su Chen let them believe whatever they wanted. Their assumptions were about to become the least of their problems. That evening, back in his temperature-controlled suite, he sat back and let the exhaustion of preparation finally catch up to him. Every warehouse was stocked, every contract signed, every debt owed to men who had no idea what was coming for their world. There was nothing left to do now but wait. And somewhere out there, the moon was already beginning to change color. The following night, Xiao Qin, Xiao Yu, Dai, and his brother gathered at the hotel, mocking Su Chen behind his back while enjoying his money in secret. Dai mentioned the loan was due soon, certain the debt would never actually be repaid. None of them realized the man they were laughing at had already outlived them once before, and remembered exactly how each of their stories ended. As the group lounged by the hotel pool, the night sky above them began to shift into something unnatural. The moon glowed brighter, then brighter still, until it looked almost like a second sun burning through the darkness. Su Chen watched from his window, swirling a glass of wine, and raised it in a quiet toast to the beginning of the end. Moments later, the moon exploded with blinding heat, and the world outside erupted into chaos in an instant. Skin blistered on contact with the light, screams echoed through the hotel as people scrambled for shelter, desperate to escape a sun that had somehow turned murderous overnight. Dai, too slow to reach safety, was left burning outside while his men fled without him, abandoning their boss to save themselves. Inside, Xiao Qian, Xiao Yu, and Lina dove into a fish tank just to escape the searing heat clinging to their skin. Outside, the city's power grid finally gave out, plunging everyone into darkness, except for one man, sitting comfortably in a suite stocked with ice, food, and everything the outside world had just lost forever. A knock came at his door. Furious survivors, burned and desperate, demanding he give up his room for someone more deserving. Su Chen answered not with words, but with a gunshot straight into Dai's stomach. He warned them plainly, take one more step, and the next bullet wouldn't miss anything vital. The crowd froze, stunned by a violence they hadn't expected from the quiet man they'd underestimated so completely. Downstairs in the lobby, a wealthy guest named Mr. Sun tried to bribe his way onto a rescue team, only to be denied outright by armed soldiers. Xiao Qian, desperate for any advantage, told the soldiers there was a murderer hiding upstairs. One soldier, Xiao Fang, volunteered to investigate alone against his captain's warnings. He crept toward the suite, only to be blinded by a flash bomb and choked by tear gas the moment the door opened. Su Chen knocked him unconscious before he could even process what happened. When Xiao Fang woke, tied to a chair, He found himself talking to a man who somehow already knew details about the government's rescue points that no ordinary citizen should have known. Su Chen warned him plainly, exposure to the burning moonlight for too long would be fatal, and the rescue route needed proper protection for the civilians walking it. Then, respecting the soldier's courage, he set him free with a warning about the automated guns mounted throughout the suite. Downstairs, chaos deepened as G.A. Chang, a low-ranking enforcer under Mr. Sun, finally snapped under the weight of his boss's cruelty. In his old life, this very man rose to power in the ruins of this hotel, becoming a warlord known as the Skull Crusher. Su Chen had simply nudged that timeline forward by a few crucial days. When Mr. Sun humiliated G.A. Chang one final time too many, the enforcer drove a blade straight into his throat without hesitation. The hotel lobby fell into stunned silence, and with that single act, G.A. Chang seized control of everyone left inside. At midnight, the coldest hour of the endless burning day, survivors wrapped themselves in blankets and began the desperate march toward the official rescue point. Su Chen's earlier warning about insulation ended up saving dozens of lives that would have been lost walking blind into that heat. But before the group could leave, 2 zombies crashed through the hotel's front doors, and the true nightmare of this new world finally revealed itself. Su Chen descended the stairs with a katana in hand, calm as ever while everyone else scattered in terror. He recognized the creatures instantly. Drought demons, mutated corpses driven by whatever desire consumed them most violently in the final moments of their human lives. One of them was Mr. Sun, reanimated by his own hatred, charging straight past Su Chen toward the man who murdered him. The other was Day, still burning with rage from the bullet wound left unhealed in his gut. Su Chen dodged the larger demon's attack with ease and drove his blade straight through Mr. Sun's skull, splitting him in half in a single clean strike. A small purple crystal floated free from the corpse, humming with power no ordinary human could ever possess. He barely had time to grab it before Day's mutated form came charging in blind fury. Rather than fight him directly, Su Chen leapt clear, letting G.A. Chang and the others finish the job downstairs while he focused on something far more important. Back in his suite, he dissolved the crystal in a glass of wine and swallowed it whole. His body erupted with raw power, clothes tearing apart as his strength surged beyond anything he'd felt since waking up in this second life. Downstairs, the last of Day's men fell silent forever, and the hotel belonged entirely to those willing to do whatever it took to survive. Meanwhile, Duan Ya found herself trapped upstairs, terrified of the chaos consuming the floors below. She made her way to Su Chen's suite, hoping desperately that partnering with him might be her only path to survival. When he opened the door, still recovering from the crystal's effects, their meeting was awkward, unexpected, and undeniably the beginning of something neither of them had planned. She revealed she wasn't only a chef, but also a licensed surgeon, a skill set far too valuable to ignore in a world with no working hospitals left. Su Chen accepted her offer to stay, on one condition: absolute loyalty and absolute usefulness. She agreed without hesitation, unaware of exactly how far that bargain would eventually take her. Outside his door, the pounding grew louder, and voices Su Chen recognized all too well began screaming for him to come out. It was Xiao Qin, Xiao Yu, and the last of their group, all mutated now, fangs bared, eyes burning red from feeding on human flesh to survive the night. Duan Ya warned him they had already eaten Lina to gain their new strength, and the news landed like a blade twisting deeper into an old wound. Su Chen stepped calmly into the hallway to meet them. An ambush from the shadows nearly caught him off guard, but the crystal's power had already sharpened his reflexes beyond anything a normal man could match. He snapped the attacker's arm and buried a blade in his throat before the man even understood what happened. Xiao Qin lunged toward him, still playing the victim, still begging for rescue. Su Chen grabbed her by the throat, exposing the very fangs she'd tried to hide beneath her desperate act. A brutal kick sent her flying through a window, nearly falling to the streets below, saved only by the very claws she'd gained from devouring her own friend. The remaining attackers rushed him together, but bullets and blades made short work of every single one, G.A. Chang included. His neck snapped without a hint of mercy. Then Xiao Qian returned, mutated further by the sun itself, spikes bursting from her spine, a long tail whipping behind her twisted new form. Su Chen activated a power he'd been saving, a berserker state that flooded his body with strength and durability beyond anything a mutated creature could withstand. The fight that followed wasn't really a fight at all. It was a reckoning, 21 brutal rounds of her body regenerating, only to be torn apart again and again for every year she'd made him suffer in a life she'd already forgotten. She begged him to explain why he was going so far, why her death needed to hurt this much. He answered with a single word: revenge. Then his foot came down, ending her story for good. Duan Ya watched the entire scene from the safety of the suite, more amazed than afraid, already sensing that the man in front of her was far more than he appeared. With the immediate threat finally gone, Su Chen turned his focus back toward the horizon, and toward a warning he alone understood. The flood was coming next, and it would drown everything the fire had left standing. Days later, torrential rain began to fall, and just as he predicted, the seawater surged inland, swallowing entire cities beneath the rising tide. Even the tall buildings of the engineering university barely stayed above the waterline. Su Chen found himself submerged along with everyone else, but a crystal core he'd absorbed from a mutated snake granted him the ability to breathe freely underwater. His body adapted instantly, small scales forming across his skin, his strength surging even further beyond what it had already become. With the flood swallowing the city, Su Chen knew exactly where the next danger would emerge: the Science and Technology University, home to a rat infestation that would eventually spawn something far more dangerous than ordinary vermin. He traveled there with Duan Ya, disguising their entry by bribing a guard with food secretly laced with her newly discovered mind control powers. Inside, the settlement was run by a tyrant named Captain Guo, a man who ruled through fear, cruelty, and casual violence against anyone beneath him. He offered Su Chen a position among his men, unaware that the quiet newcomer had already decided his fate the moment he set foot inside. While investigating the camp, Su Chen crossed paths with a young girl named Shaum, whose two brothers had been sentenced to a brutal death for failing one of the camp's tasks. Determined to save them, she stepped into a monster-filled arena, ready to sacrifice herself for the only family she had left. Su Chen intervened just in time, ending the giant rat threatening her with a single dismissive strike. Overhead, a scientist named Li Hyun watched with growing fascination, convinced that Su Chen's body held the genetic key to a perfect evolution he'd been chasing for months. He revealed his true ambition, using rat genes to build an unstoppable army, and offered Su Chen a place at his side. The offer was refused instantly, and with brutal contempt. Furious, Li Hyun injected Captain Guo with an unstable serum, transforming him into a grotesque, regenerating monster, and setting him loose to kill Su Chen on command. The fight was short and merciless, ending with tons of concrete summoned from Su Chen's personal storage, burying what remained of the mutated captain for good. Enraged, Li Hyun unleashed an army of caged ratmen, human experiments twisted into mindless soldiers obeying his every command. While Duan Ya took charge of the defense below, using her growing mental powers to hold back the swarm, Su Chen pushed deeper into the tower, determined to end the source of the chaos once and for all. Inside, he discovered a woman trapped in a containment tank, unmutated, unmistakably familiar. It was Yun Yun, the heartbroken woman from the bar, somehow surviving here against every possible odd. He shattered the glass and pulled her free, only for Li Hyun to appear moments later, transformed into a monstrous half-man, half-rat, screaming that Yun Yun belonged to him alone. Su Chen remained completely unshaken, calmly setting Yun Yun down while inviting the scientist to attack with everything he had. With a single gesture, he obliterated a lesser mutant sent to test him, barely even registering the effort it took. Yun Yun, grateful for her rescue, leapt from the tower to help his friends below, growing to a massive size the moment she landed, crushing the surrounding rat swarm beneath her feet. Meanwhile, Li Hyun unleashed his true form, merging with the rat swarm itself to become the Rat King, a creature he believed was truly immortal. Su Chen allowed himself to be consumed by the horde without resistance, calmly waiting inside the darkness until the moment was right. From within the swarm, he tore his way back out, splitting the Rat King in half and ripping the crystal core straight from its chest. But that single victory wasn't the end. Deep inside Li Hyun's private lab, Su Chen encountered something far stranger, an illusion built from the scientist's own twisted memories, one that pulled him into another man's skin entirely. He found himself reliving Li Hyun's past, a toxic relationship with a fellow researcher named Professor Xiao, one that spiraled into cannibalism, obsession, and a desperate hunt for the very crystal cores Su Chen now carried. Realizing the trap for what it truly was, Su Chen shattered the illusion from the inside, revealing his own face beneath the disguise, and ending the parasitic creature controlling the vision for good. With the threat finally extinguished, and Yun Yun and Duan Ya both firmly by his side, Su Chen turned his focus toward the next great danger, waiting somewhere in the flooded ruins of the city. Because in a world this cruel, surviving one nightmare only ever meant walking straight into the next. With the university finally cleared, Su Chen led his new group of survivors, dozens of rescued medical students among them, toward a settlement he remembered from his old life. Along the way, the streets themselves had become hunting grounds for something far worse than rats, the Devourer clan, a tribe of cannibalistic mutants who fed on any human unlucky enough to cross their territory. Using a psychic ability absorbed from an earlier kill, Su Chen could sense heat signatures from blood itself, revealing an ambush waiting to spring the moment his group let their guard down. Several careless survivors ignored his warning, rushing to save a woman used as bait, only to be slaughtered instantly by arrows raining down from hidden rooftops. Rather than risk his entire group for people who refused to listen, Su Chen unleashed a new power, corpse control, summoning an army of reanimated bodies to overwhelm the ambushers from behind. The distraction bought his group enough time to slip away entirely undetected, leaving the devourer brutes to tear uselessly through mindless corpses instead. When the two remaining hunters chased them down regardless, Su Chen simply let the horde finish what he'd already started, walking away without lifting another finger. The group finally reached the safe zone, only to be met by a hostile enforcer named Captain Sun, who dismissed them outright as trespassers unworthy of shelter. Duanya attempted to use her mind control, only to discover, for the first time, that it failed completely against him. Before violence could break out, a familiar face intervened. Xiao Fang, the very soldier Su Chen had once spared back at the hotel. He vouched for the group immediately, and the moment Su Chen mentioned dozens of doctors traveling with him, even Captain Sun's suspicion gave way to reluctant tolerance. Inside the safe zone, the group discovered a woman infected by mutated fungus, her body slowly consumed by strange white growths that regenerated faster each time they were removed. Su Chen recognized the danger instantly, warning everyone to avoid the region's rapidly evolving plant life before it spread any further. Just then, chaos erupted elsewhere in the settlement. The reckless son of the city's ruling lord tearing through the streets in a stolen vehicle, firing wildly at innocent civilians for sport. When he set his sights on Yun, mistaking her weakened state for an easy target, she smiled and let him get exactly close enough to make his final mistake. The moment he reached for her, she grew to her true size mid-fall, crushing his leg and destroying his vehicle in a single devastating impact. Duanya quickly used her powers to rewrite the memories of every witness nearby, turning the young lord's own accusations against him instantly. The commotion drew out the true ruler of the settlement, City Lord Jiang himself, a man publicly praised as noble and generous throughout the camp. That night, forced to sleep outside the safe zone's walls, Su Chen intercepted an assassination attempt sent by the young lord seeking petty revenge. Before executing the final attacker, he pressed for information, and what he uncovered turned his stomach even after everything he'd already witnessed. City Lord Jiang had been secretly trading his own citizens to the Devourer clan, exchanging innocent lives for food and protection behind everyone's back. Su Chen led an ambush at the very site of the next scheduled trade, wiping out the Devourer envoys before they could complete the exchange. Furious and cornered, Jiang tried desperately to frame Su Chen's group as the true traitors, accusing them of kidnapping refugees to sell for their own gain. Before a riot could break out, General Ga arrived with his own soldiers, publicly defending Su Chen's reputation in front of the entire settlement. Cornered by his own lies, City Lord Jiang finally revealed the truth himself, boasting openly about the trades he'd arranged, insisting he was simply doing what needed to be done to survive. Su Chen answered that argument with a single devastating punch, calling him exactly what he was, a coward hiding behind noble words. With the truth finally exposed, Su Chen offered General Ga a choice: stay loyal to a traitor, or help build something better entirely from the ground up. The general didn't hesitate for long. He rallied every soldier still loyal to him, abandoning the corrupt settlement to build a new base founded on something the old one never had: honesty. When the young lord tried one final desperate act of violence, holding a hidden grenade in his own mouth as a suicide attack, Su Chen calmly asked his father how human flesh tasted just before the bomb detonated. The explosion confirmed everything Su Chen already suspected from his previous life. City Lord Jiang wasn't human at all, but a devourer hiding in plain sight among the very people he claimed to protect. Too dangerous to challenge directly just yet, Su Chen let him retreat, filing the threat away for a confrontation he knew was still to come. Weeks passed as the new settlement took shape under General Ga's leadership, its survival secured almost entirely by supplies Su Chen had personally recovered from an abandoned devourer stronghold. Captain Sun, jealous of the growing praise surrounding Su Chen, seized an opportunity to prove himself elsewhere, chasing rumors of devourer activity near a nearby hospital. Meanwhile, Su Chen set his sights on a far more valuable target, an abandoned military base rumored to hold enough weaponry to arm an entire army. Accompanied by Bei Kang, a fierce special forces captain, and Xiao Fang, the loyal soldier who'd trusted him from the very beginning, Su Chen made his way toward the flooded entrance of the base. The path forward required diving through water still infested with mutated ghouls, creatures drawn instantly to any movement beneath the surface. When Bei Kang panicked underwater, losing her breath at the sight of dozens of glowing eyes watching them from the dark, Su Chen pulled her close and shared what little air he had left, buying her the seconds she needed to recover. Using his mental abilities, he froze the surrounding ghouls in place just long enough for the group to slip past and reach the base's flooded entrance undetected. Inside, the base's old power grid still hummed with life, untouched since the day its original soldiers evacuated in a desperate hurry. The armory alone held enough weapons to arm hundreds of survivors, more than enough to change the balance of power across the entire region. While exploring deeper, a small detail caught Su Chen completely off guard. A mysterious black cat with glowing stripes, snatching a rare crystal core straight out of his hand before he could even react. It vanished deeper into the base before he could catch it, taking his offered snacks along with it out of pure spite. For a man who had just torn apart a rat king with his bare hands, being outsmarted twice by a cat in under a minute was almost impressively humiliating. Before the group could finish clearing the base, a deep rumbling shook the corridors, and Xiao Feng came racing back in a stolen tank, chased by something massive. A creature unlike anything Su Chen remembered from his previous life. A mutated beast resembling an enormous dog, firing devastating energy, blasts straight from its snout. With the armory's supplies already secured safely inside his personal storage, Su Chen refused to let Bei Kang risk herself as a distraction, pulling her clear just before another blast tore straight through the tank. He ordered her to check on Xiao Feng while he turned to face the monster completely alone, calm despite the sheer size of the threat standing in front of him. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, its crystal core was already as good as his. Because in this life, there wasn't a single monster left on Earth that Su Chen intended to lose to. Every step forward had been paid for in blood, in betrayal, and in the memories of a death he refused to ever repeat. And every enemy that stood in his way only made him stronger for the ones still waiting ahead. Looking back at everything Su Chen had already survived, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Every enemy who underestimated him ended up feeding his growth instead of stopping it. Xiao Qian thought she could betray him twice and walk away untouched. Jie Chang thought loyalty to a monster like Mr. Sun would protect him forever. Captain Guo thought brute force alone could crush anyone who challenged his authority. Li Hyun thought genius alone gave him the right to play God with other people's bodies. City Lord Zhang thought hiding behind a mask of kindness would let him trade lives forever without consequence. Every single one of them was wrong, and every single one of them paid for that mistake with everything they had. What made Su Chen dangerous wasn't just his powers, though those alone had already reshaped entire settlements. It was the fact that he'd already lived through this exact nightmare once before, and refused to walk through it blind a second time. Every warehouse he emptied, every warning he gave, every ally he recruited, all of it came from lessons written in blood the first time around. Duanya saw it clearly the moment she chose to stay by his side instead of running. Yunyun saw it the second he pulled her from that containment tank without hesitation. Bei Kang saw it underwater when he gave up his own air just to keep her alive. Even General Jie saw it, standing in front of an entire crowd, choosing to abandon a corrupt lord for a stranger who simply told the truth. None of them were following Su Chen because he demanded it. They were following him because, in a world built entirely on betrayal, he was somehow still the one person who kept his word. That was the real twist buried beneath every crystal core and every battle. The boy who died begging in his last life had become the one thing this new world desperately needed, someone worth trusting. The revenge he'd promised himself was already complete. Xiao Qian was gone. Xiao Yu was gone. Every person who once made him feel small had already paid the full price for it. But somewhere along the way, revenge had quietly stopped being the point. What Su Chen was building now was bigger than settling old scores. It was a home carved out of chaos, for people who had nothing left to lose and nowhere else to turn. And standing in front of a monster that outsized anything he remembered from his last life, Su Chen understood exactly what came next. Not survival for its own sake, but protection for the people who had finally chosen to stand beside him. The creature roared, energy building once again behind its glowing snout, and Su Chen simply rolled his shoulders and stepped forward without a flicker of fear. Whatever crystal was hiding inside that monstrous body, whatever new power it might grant him, it was going to belong to him within the hour. Because that was the one truth Su Chen carried with him from his very first breath in this second life. Nothing in this ruined world was strong enough to take away what he'd already decided to keep. Behind him, the base's armory sat completely emptied, folded safely away inside a space no other living soul could touch. Ahead of him, a creature bigger than the tank that had just failed to stop it, prepared for another devastating strike. And between the two of them stood a man who had already died once, and refused to let it happen a second time. He remembered every disaster this world would throw at him next, the mutant tribes fighting for dominance across the ruined city, the corpse queen rumored to control the flooded northern districts, the rat swarms that still hadn't fully settled after their king's death. He remembered them all, and he intended to be ready for every single one. Because unlike the countless people who died screaming in his first life, Su Chen no longer feared the end of the world. He'd already survived it once. This time, he was the one the world needed to fear. The monster lunged, jaws wide, another blast already charging deep in its throat. Su Chen didn't retreat an inch. He simply raised both fists, eyes glowing with the accumulated strength of every crystal core he'd claimed so far, and waited for the exact moment to strike back. Somewhere behind him, Beikang and Xiaofang scrambled to safety, trusting completely in the one man who had never once let them down. And somewhere ahead, buried deep inside that monstrous chest, another piece of power waited to be claimed by the only person in this world who truly understood what it would take to survive whatever came next. This was never really a story about the apocalypse itself. It was a story about a man who refused to be a victim twice. Every warehouse he emptied started with humiliation, a boss who abandoned him, a paycheck docked for 21 seconds. Every crystal he claimed started with a betrayal that once left him bleeding out on a floor, powerless to stop it. Every ally who now stood beside him started as a stranger with no reason to trust a man carrying that much rage behind a calm expression. And every enemy who underestimated him started their downfall the exact moment they assumed weakness where there was none left at all. Xiao Kaiyan thought loyalty was something owed to her simply because he loved her once. She learned too late that love without respect was never loyalty at all. Li Hyun thought intelligence made him untouchable. That genius alone excused every horror he committed in the name of progress. He learned too late that even the smartest mind means nothing against someone who's already survived the very future he was trying to engineer. City Lord Zhang thought kindness was a mask he could wear forever, hiding a monster underneath a noble smile. He learned too late that masks always slip, especially in front of a man who's already seen every version of that lie play out before. Every single one of them made the same mistake, believing that Su Chen was still the same broken man who died, begging in a burning shelter. He wasn't. He hadn't been that man since the moment he opened his eyes 1 month before the world ended, armed with memories no one else alive could possibly share. That was always his true power, more valuable than any crystal core, more dangerous than any berserker rage. Foresight, paid for in blood, and refined into something no monster or manipulator could ever plan around. While others scrambled blindly through a collapsing world, Su Chen simply walked the path he'd already walked once before, correcting every mistake that once cost him everything. He saved the people worth saving. He punished the people who deserved punishment. And he built something that had never existed in his first life at all, a place and people worth protecting for their own sake. That shift was subtle, easy to miss beneath the violence, and the power and the endless string of monsters falling before him. But it was there, in the way he shared his air with Beikang underwater. It was there, in the way he pulled Yunyun from that tank without hesitation. It was there, in the way Duanya chose to stay, not because she was forced to, but because she'd finally found someone worth staying for. Revenge gave Su Chen a reason to survive his first few days back in this world, but it was never going to be enough to carry him through everything still ahead. Somewhere between the warehouse he emptied for spite and the base he was clearing for his allies, revenge quietly became something else entirely. Purpose. And purpose, unlike revenge, doesn't run out the moment the people who wronged you are finally gone. The monster in front of him roared again, desperate now, sensing the fight was already slipping away from it. Su Chen answered with a fist wrapped in raw, undeniable power, and for the first time since this fight began, the beast finally understood exactly what kind of man it had chosen to attack. Not a victim, not prey. A survivor who had already paid the price for every ounce of strength standing between this monster and the people he'd sworn to protect. The impact landed like a falling star, cracking straight through bone and scale alike, and the creature staggered backward for the very first time since the fight began. Su Chen pressed the advantage immediately, refusing to give it a single second to recover or regenerate. Because in this world, mercy wasn't weakness, but hesitation absolutely was, and hesitation was a mistake he had already paid for once with his own life. Behind him, Beikang watched in stunned silence, finally understanding exactly why an entire settlement had chosen to follow this man without question. It wasn't fear. It was certainty, the unshakable knowledge that whatever came next, Su Chen would already have a plan for it. The battle raged on through the flooded corridors of the abandoned base, but the outcome had already been decided the moment Su Chen stepped forward without hesitation. Because that was the truth this entire journey had proven, again and again, from the burning moonlight to the flooded ruins of a dying city. Some men break when the world ends. Others simply become exactly what that world demands of them. Su Chen had already chosen which one he was going to be. And nothing left in this apocalypse, not monsters, not mutants, not the ghosts of the people who wronged him, was ever going to make him choose differently again. With the beast finally staggering under the weight of his relentless assault, Su Chen delivered one final devastating blow, straight to the creature's exposed skull. It let out one last defeated roar before collapsing completely, its massive body finally still against the flooded corridor floor. A crystal core, larger than any he'd claimed before, pulsed faintly within its shattered chest, waiting for him to finish what he'd started. Su Chen reached down and took it without ceremony, already feeling the familiar warmth of new strength ready to settle into his bones. Behind him, Xiao Feng and Bei Kang finally caught their breath, staring at the fallen giant with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Neither of them bothered hiding. With the base secured and its arsenal safely tucked away inside his personal storage, Su Chen turned back toward the surface, ready to bring everything they'd recovered home to the people counting on them. The settlement General Ga was building would have weapons now, real weapons, enough to defend every soul who'd chosen to walk away from a corrupt lord and start something honest instead. Su Chen thought back to everyone who had died in his first life waiting for help that never came. Soldiers without weapons, civilians without shelter, children without anyone strong enough to protect them. This time, that wasn't going to happen, not on his watch, and not while he still had breath left in his lungs to prevent it. As they made their way back through the ruined streets, the sky above them had finally begun to calm. The worst of the heat wave long since passed, the floodwaters slowly beginning to recede into something almost survivable. It wasn't peace, not yet, and maybe not for a very long time. But it was progress, hard-won and paid for entirely in Su Chen's own blood, sweat, and unwavering resolve. Duanya greeted them at the gates, relief washing over her face the moment she saw all three of them return safely. Yun wasn't far behind, already asking if there was any food left over from the raid, her hunger apparently as immortal as her giant transformation. General Ga arrived shortly after, eyes widening at the sheer scale of weapons and supplies now sitting safely inside their new base. He didn't need to ask where it all came from. He already knew exactly who to thank. That night, for the first time since the world ended, the settlement didn't sleep in fear. They slept with full stomachs, secured walls, and weapons enough to protect every family sheltering behind them. Su Chen sat alone for a while, looking out over the quiet camp, thinking back to a version of himself who once died alone, unnoticed, unprotected, and completely forgotten. That man was gone now, buried in a shelter that no longer existed in a world that no longer existed either. In his place stood someone the apocalypse itself had learned to fear, not because he wanted power for its own sake, but because power, in the right hands, was the only thing standing between chaos and the people who deserved a chance to survive it. Xiao Qin was gone. Xiao Yu was gone. Every debt from his old life had already been paid in full. But the world was still ending, piece by piece, and there were still countless people out there who hadn't found anyone strong enough to protect them yet. Su Chen intended to be exactly that, for as many of them as he possibly could. Because somewhere along this brutal, blood-soaked road, revenge had transformed into something far more lasting. A promise. Never again would he stand by helplessly while the people around him suffered. Never again would he die without a fight. And never again would this world get to decide his fate for him. This time, he was the one writing the ending. Every monster he defeated, every settlement he saved, every ally who chose to stand beside him, all of it built toward a future entirely of his own making. Duanya moved closer, resting quietly beside him without a word, simply grateful to still be alive, still be safe, still be exactly where she belonged. Yun settled on his other side, finally satisfied after finding leftover rations, her presence somehow making even the wreckage around them feel a little less like the end of everything. Bei Kang stood watch nearby, finally understanding that loyalty to this man wasn't blind faith at all. It was simply recognizing strength, kindness, and unwavering resolve, and choosing to stand beside it instead of against it. General Ga looked out over the new settlement, already imagining the walls, the farmland, the future they were about to build together from absolutely nothing. None of it would have been possible without one man's willingness to remember every mistake from a life that technically never happened at all. And somewhere out there, beyond the flooded ruins and the mutated beasts still roaming free, more danger waited. The Corpse Queen ruling the northern districts, the Rat clans still scattered and reforming, the Devourer clan, wounded but far from destroyed. Su Chen already knew all of it was coming. He'd lived through every single piece of it once before. And this time, he wasn't walking into any of it unprepared, unprotected, or alone. This time, he had people worth fighting for. This time, he had power earned through blood, strategy, and a memory no enemy could ever anticipate. This time, the apocalypse wasn't something happening to him. It was something he was learning to master, one crystal core, one settlement, one enemy at a time. The story of Su Chen was never really about surviving the end of the world. It was about a man who refused to let his second chance go to waste, no matter what it cost him to protect it. and judging by everything he'd already accomplished in just a few short weeks, the apocalypse itself had far more to fear from him than he ever had to fear from it. Because somewhere in the ashes of a world that once left him for dead, Su Chen had built something no amount of chaos could ever fully destroy again. A home, a family, and a reason to keep fighting, long after every old score had already been settled. That, in the end, was the true power he carried, stronger than any crystal core, more dangerous than any mutated beast lurking in the flooded ruins around him. The unbreakable will of a man who had already died once, and simply refused to let it happen the same way twice. As dawn broke over the settlement the next morning, the sky finally showing the first hints of calm since the disasters began, Su Chen stood at the edge of the new base, watching the horizon with quiet resolve. Somewhere out there, more enemies waited, more monsters, more corrupt men clinging to power built on other people's suffering. He wasn't afraid of any of it, because for the first time since waking up in this second chance at life, Su Chen understood exactly what he was fighting for. Not revenge, not survival, but the people standing behind him, trusting him, believing in him, and refusing to let this broken world take anything else away from any of them ever again. And as long as they stood together, Su Chen was absolutely certain of one thing: no apocalypse, no matter how brutal, was ever going to be strong enough to break that. Duan Ya reached over and gently took his hand, a small gesture, but one that carried more meaning than either of them needed to say out loud. Yun Yun leaned against his shoulder, already half asleep despite the danger still lingering somewhere beyond their walls. Bei Kang stood a few steps away, arms crossed, silently vowing to protect this fragile peace for as long as she possibly could. General Jie watched over all of them with quiet pride, already planning the next steps needed to turn this makeshift camp into something that could genuinely last. None of it was perfect, none of it was safe, but all of it was real, earned, and worth protecting with everything Su Chen had left to give. The old version of him, the one who died alone and betrayed, would never have believed a moment like this was even possible. But that man was gone now, replaced by someone who had learned the hardest lesson the apocalypse could ever teach. Strength without purpose is empty, but strength given to protect the people who matter, that becomes something the end of the world itself can never fully take away. Su Chen closed his eyes for just a moment, letting the weight of everything he'd survived settle quietly across his shoulders. The warehouse he emptied out of spite, the fiancé he buried out of justice, the monsters, the crystals, the betrayals, all of it had led him here, to this exact moment, standing among people who had chosen him, not because they had to, but because he'd finally proven he was worth choosing. Somewhere beyond the walls of their new settlement, the world was still ending. It probably always would be, in one form or another, for as long as any of them managed to stay alive. But for the first time since he opened his eyes in this second life, Su Chen wasn't dreading what came next. He was ready for it. Because whatever monster, whatever tyrant, whatever nightmare the apocalypse still had waiting in the shadows, none of it had ever met a man quite like him before. A man who had already died once, remembered every single mistake that killed him, and came back with absolutely nothing left to fear. The sun rose fully over the settlement, warm for the first time in what felt like forever, casting long shadows across walls built from salvaged steel and hard-won survival. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang out, signaling the start of another day, another chance to build something worth protecting in a world that had tried, and failed, to break him completely. Su Chen opened his eyes, looked out over everything he'd fought to create, and allowed himself, just for a moment, to feel something he hadn't felt in either of his lives until now. Peace. Fragile, temporary, and entirely earned, but peace all the same. And as the settlement stirred to life around him, families gathering supplies, soldiers checking their new weapons, children daring to laugh again for the first time in weeks, Su Chen finally allowed himself to believe something he never thought possible. This second chance wasn't just about surviving the apocalypse anymore. It was about building something worth surviving for. And no matter what horrors still waited beyond the horizon, Su Chen was absolutely certain of one final truth. He would face every single one of them, not as the broken man who died begging on a shelter floor, but as the protector this shattered world had somehow, against every possible odd, finally given him the chance to become. Looking back at the road that brought him, this wasn't a hero born with power handed to him. It was a man who clawed his way back from the absolute bottom, armed with nothing but memory, rage, and an unshakable refusal to let history repeat itself. Every warehouse he emptied wasn't greed. It was preparation earned through unimaginable suffering the first time around. Every enemy he destroyed wasn't cruelty. It was justice delayed by an entire lifetime of powerlessness. And every ally he gathered wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a man finally choosing to be someone worth following. Xiao Qian thought betrayal came without consequence. She was wrong. Li Hyun thought intelligence excused monstrous cruelty. He was wrong too. City Lord Jang thought a mask of kindness could hide an eternity of quiet betrayal. In the end, that mask cost him absolutely everything. Every single villain in this story made the exact same mistake, underestimating a man who had already lived through the worst this world could offer, and came back determined never to be caught off guard again. That's what made Su Chen's journey so satisfying to watch unfold. It wasn't just about power scaling higher with every chapter. It was about watching a broken man slowly, deliberately, rebuild himself into someone unbreakable. Someone who protected the weak instead of ignoring them. Someone who punished cruelty instead of tolerating it. Someone who finally understood that true strength was never about what you could take from others. It was about what you were willing to give to protect the people who mattered. Duanya mattered. Yunyun mattered. Beikang mattered. General Ga and every soldier who chose honesty over tyranny mattered. And in a world determined to strip away everything human from the people trying to survive it, that single choice, to keep caring anyway, was the most powerful ability Su Chen ever possessed. More powerful than any crystal core, more dangerous than any berserker rage, more lasting than any revenge he could have ever taken. Because revenge fades the moment the debt is paid. But purpose built on protecting the people who finally chose to trust him, that only grows stronger with every single day he wakes up ready to defend it. The apocalypse took everything from Su Chen once. His life, his dignity, his sense of safety, in a world that no longer made any sense. But it gave him something back too. Something he never had in his first life at all. A second chance, not just to survive, but to become the kind of man worth surviving for. And through every twist, every betrayal, every impossible monster standing in his way, that's exactly what he chose to become. Not a victim clinging to whatever scraps the world allowed him, but a protector, standing firmly between chaos and the people who finally had somewhere safe to call home. Somewhere out there, more challenges are already waiting. The Corpse Queen still rules the flooded north. The Devourer clan is wounded, but nowhere near finished. And countless smaller threats are still scattered across a world still learning to survive its own collapse. But if this story has proven anything at all, it's this. None of it stands a real chance against a man who has already died once, remembered every mistake that killed him, and returned with absolutely nothing left to lose. Su Chen isn't just surviving the end of the world anymore. He's rebuilding it, one warehouse, one settlement, one rescued life at a time. And whatever comes next, whatever nightmare still waits somewhere beyond the horizon, one thing has already been proven beyond any doubt. This is no longer a story about a man running from his past. It's a story about a man who finally, completely, became exactly who he was always meant to be. Someone strong enough to protect what matters. Someone wise enough to remember every lesson the apocalypse tried to teach him. And someone unbreakable enough to make sure that no matter what this ruined world throws at him next, he will never again be the man who died alone, forgotten, and powerless on a cold shelter floor. That man is gone, and in his place stands someone the end of the world itself has finally learned to fear. Looking at everything Su Chen has already overcome, from an abandoned delivery man to the protector of an entire settlement, it's clear this was never simply a story about power. It was a story about redemption, earned the hardest way possible, through loss, through rage, and through the slow, deliberate choice to become someone better than the world ever expected him to be. Every crystal core he claimed made him stronger, but every person he chose to protect made him human again, in a world doing everything it possibly could to strip that humanity away. That balance, between overwhelming strength and quiet compassion, is exactly what turned Su Chen from a simple revenge story into something far more meaningful. Because at the end of the day, anyone can tear down the people who wronged them. Far fewer can build something new and lasting out of the wreckage that's left behind. Su Chen did both, and he did it without ever losing sight of who he truly wanted to become. Not a monster feared by everyone around him, but a protector, respected, trusted, and finally, genuinely, loved by the people who mattered most. Duanya found in him someone worth staying for. Yunyun found in him someone worth trusting completely. Beikang found in him someone worth following into danger without a single moment of hesitation. And General Ga found in him proof that even in the middle of an apocalypse, honesty and loyalty could still mean something. None of that happened by accident. It happened because Su Chen chose, again and again, to be better than the world that once broke him completely. That choice, more than any power, more than any crystal core, is what truly defines this story. A reminder that even after the absolute worst life has to offer, there's still a path forward, if you're willing to fight hard enough to find it. Su Chen found that path. He walked it through fire, through flood, through betrayal, and through more monsters than most people could ever imagine surviving. And every single step of that journey brought him closer to something far more valuable than revenge ever could. A life worth living, surrounded by people worth protecting, in a world finally beginning to feel a little less like an ending and a little more like a new beginning. That's the true legacy of everything Su Chen has built so far. Not the enemies he's destroyed, not the power he's accumulated, but the family he's created, out of nothing, in the middle of the worst disaster humanity has ever faced. And no matter what challenges still wait for him beyond the horizon, one truth has already been proven beyond any doubt. Su Chen will face every single one of them exactly the way he's faced everything else since waking up in this second chance at life. Prepared, unshaken, and completely unwilling to let this broken world take away anything else that truly matters to him. That is the story of a man who died once, remembered everything, and came back to make absolutely certain he would never lose again. Standing at the edge of the newly built settlement, watching the sun climb higher over walls raised from nothing but scavenged steel and unshakable resolve, Su Chen finally allowed the weight of everything to settle across his shoulders. Every person who once wronged him was gone. Xiao Qin, buried in the very hotel where she once betrayed him a second time. Xiao Yu, ended before his transformation could ever finish taking hold. Day, consumed by his own hatred until nothing human remained. Mr. Sun, split in two by a blade wielded by the very man he once mocked as worthless. Captain Guo, buried beneath tons of concrete summoned from a power he never understood. Li Hyun, torn apart from the inside by the very illusion he built to control others. City Lord Zhang, exposed as the very monster he claimed to protect his people from. Every debt from his first life had finally, completely, been paid in full. And yet, standing here now, Su Chen realized something he never expected to feel. Satisfaction, yes, but not emptiness. Because unlike the version of revenge he once imagined burning through his chest, this ending didn't leave him hollow. It left him surrounded by Duan Ya's quiet loyalty, by Yun Yun's unexpected warmth, by Bei Kang's fierce protection, and by an entire settlement of people who chose to trust him when they had absolutely no reason to. That was the real victory this entire journey had been building toward all along. Not the fall of every enemy who once made him suffer, but the rise of something none of them ever expected him capable of building: a home, a family, and a future finally worth protecting. General Ga approached quietly, standing beside him as the settlement stirred fully awake around them. Soldiers checked their newly acquired weapons. Children played near freshly planted crops, laughing for the first time since the world ended. Survivors who once had nothing now had walls, food, and each other. All of it existed because one man refused to let his second chance go to waste. Duan Ya stepped up beside him, resting her head gently against his shoulder, no longer the frightened chef who once begged him not to abandon her. Yun Yun joined them moments later, already stealing a piece of bread from a nearby table, her hunger as endless and endearing as ever. Bei Kang stood watch a few paces away, arms crossed, silently vowing that whatever threat came next, she would face it standing right beside him. Su Chen looked out over everything he'd built, and for the first time since waking up in this second life, allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The apocalypse had taken everything from him once: his dignity, his safety, his belief that the world could ever be fair. But it had also given him something his first life never offered: the chance to become someone worth trusting, worth following, and worth loving. He thought back to the man who died alone on a cold shelter floor, betrayed by everyone he'd ever trusted, forgotten before his body had even finished going cold. That man was gone completely now, replaced by someone the end of the world itself had learned to respect. Not because he demanded it through fear, but because he earned it through every sacrifice, every act of protection, and every choice to be better than the cruelty that once nearly destroyed him. Somewhere beyond the settlement's walls, more dangers still waited: monsters, mutants, and men who hadn't yet learned the same lesson every villain before them eventually did. That underestimating Su Chen was always, without exception, the very last mistake they would ever make. But those battles belonged to another day. For now, Su Chen simply stood in the morning light, surrounded by the people who had chosen him, and finally allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in either of his lives until this exact moment. Peace, earned through blood, sacrifice, and an unbreakable refusal to ever be a victim again. The settlement around him buzzed with quiet, determined life, proof that even in the middle of humanity's darkest hour, something good could still be built from the wreckage left behind. Su Chen had once believed that survival meant taking whatever you needed, no matter the cost to everyone around you. He knew better now. True survival meant building something worth protecting, and then standing firm, no matter what monster or tyrant tried to tear it back down. That lesson, more than any crystal core, more than any berserker strength, was the true power that carried him through every impossible battle this journey had thrown his way. And it would carry him through every battle still waiting ahead. Because Su Chen wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for a future, one built by people who refused to let the apocalypse strip away their humanity, along with everything else it had already taken. Duan Ya squeezed his hand gently, grounding him in the present moment instead of the painful memories still echoing somewhere behind his eyes. Yun Yun laughed at something one of the children said nearby, her joy simple, unguarded, and completely genuine. Bei Kang finally allowed herself to relax, if only for a moment, trusting fully in the man who had already proven, again and again, that he would never let harm reach the people under his protection. General Ga looked out over the settlement with quiet pride, already planning walls, farmland, and defenses strong enough to withstand whatever the world still had left to throw at them. None of it was perfect, none of it was guaranteed to last forever. But all of it was real, hard-won, and worth every single sacrifice it took to build. Su Chen closed his eyes one final time, letting the warmth of the morning sun settle across his face, a small comfort in a world that had tried its absolute hardest to take even that away from him. When he opened them again, he wasn't looking backward anymore, toward betrayal, toward death, toward a first life defined entirely by powerlessness. He was looking forward, toward a settlement full of people counting on him, toward a family he never expected to find, and toward a future, finally, completely, his own to shape. The story of Su Chen was never really about the apocalypse tearing the world apart. It was about one man's refusal to let that same destruction define who he became in the aftermath. He rose from powerlessness to protection. He rose from betrayal to loyalty, both given and received in equal measure. He rose from a victim who died begging, to a protector who others now looked to for strength, guidance, and hope in a world that offered precious little of either. That transformation, hard-earned through every battle, every loss, and every impossible choice along the way, was always the true heart of this entire story. Not the monsters he defeated, not the crystal cores he claimed, but the man he chose to become, when the world gave him every reason to become something far worse instead. Su Chen looked out over his settlement one final time, watching the sun rise fully over walls built from nothing but sacrifice and unbreakable resolve. Somewhere out there, the apocalypse would keep testing him, again and again, with threats he could already anticipate and dangers he never saw coming. But he was ready for all of it now, in a way the broken man from his first life never could have been. Because this time, he wasn't facing the end of the world alone. He had people beside him who trusted him completely, and a purpose worth fighting for every single day the sun rose over this fragile, hard-won peace. Duan Ya, Yun Yun, and Bei Kang stood with him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine loyalty earned through everything he'd already sacrificed to keep them safe. General Ga and every survivor who called this settlement home stood behind him too, proof that even in humanity's darkest hour, honesty, courage, and protection could still build something lasting. The man who once died alone, forgotten, and betrayed had finally become something the end of the world itself had learned to respect. Not through fear, not through cruelty, but through the simple, unbreakable choice to protect what mattered, no matter what it cost him to do it. That choice defined every single victory in this story, from the warehouse he emptied out of necessity to the settlement he built out of hope. And that same choice would define every victory still waiting for him beyond the horizon. Because Su Chen understood something now that his old self never had the chance to learn. Power without purpose is empty, but power given freely, to protect the people who finally chose to believe in you, that becomes something no apocalypse, no monster, and no betrayal can ever fully take away again. The sun climbed higher over the settlement, casting warm light across walls raised from wreckage and across a family built from nothing but shared survival and hard-earned trust. Su Chen stood at the center of it all, no longer the broken delivery man who died alone on a cold shelter floor. He stood instead as proof that even after the absolute worst life has to offer, there is always a path forward, for anyone willing to fight hard enough to find it. He found that path through fire, through flood, through betrayal, and through more impossible battles than most people could ever imagine surviving. And every single step of that journey led him here, to this exact moment, surrounded by people worth protecting, in a world finally beginning to feel a little less like an ending. That was the true legacy of everything Su Chen had built, not the enemies he destroyed, not the power he accumulated, but the family he created, out of absolutely nothing, in the middle of the worst disaster humanity had ever faced. And that legacy, more than any crystal core, more than any berserker rage, was the one thing this broken world could never take away from him again. Su Chen looked out over his settlement one last time, at the people who trusted him, the family who loved him, and the future he had fought so hard to build for every single one of them. Whatever challenges still waited beyond the horizon, he would face them exactly the way he had faced everything else since waking up in this second chance at life. Prepared, unshaken, and utterly unwilling to let this world take anything else that mattered to him. The man who once died begging on a cold shelter floor was gone forever now. In his place stood a protector, a leader, and a survivor who had transformed his own worst tragedy into the foundation for something the apocalypse itself could never fully destroy. Duan Ya held his hand. Yun Yun leaned against his shoulder. Bei Kang stood guard beside him, and General Jie watched over the settlement they had all built together, out of nothing but sacrifice and unbreakable hope. This was Su Chen's true victory, greater than any revenge he had ever claimed, and stronger than any power he had ever absorbed. Not the fall of the people who once wronged him, but the rise of everything they never believed he could become. A protector, a leader, a man who died once, remembered everything, and finally built a life worth living for good.